All right, today we're opening up a fascinating and, a pretty lesser-known case file. It comes from a quiet summer camp on Lake Champlain way, way back in 1968. But here's the real question, the central mystery we're going to dig into. What if a huge, life-altering event could be just wiped from your memory, only to bubble back up a whole decade later in your nightmares? And that is exactly where this whole story kicks off. Section 1, a 10-year-old nightmare. Yeah, this is all about how some seriously unsettling dreams in 1978 became the trigger for a full-blown investigation into something that happened 10 years before. So meet Michael Lapp. In 1978, he starts having these really disturbing, fragmented dreams. And the key thing here is they weren't just bad dreams, no. They felt like broken pieces of a memory trying to push their way through. It got so persistent that he actually went to get help. This timeline really puts the whole puzzle into perspective, doesn't it? In 1968, you've got the incident itself, this strange sighting followed by a big chunk of missing time. Then, poof, a full decade of total silence, until 1978, when the nightmares start, and a formal investigation is finally launched. That 10-year gap is what makes this case so incredibly strange. So let's rewind and head into Section 2 to see how this all began, the forgotten summer night. We're going back to August 7th, 1968, at a private girls' summer camp called Buff Ledge, right there on the shores of Lake Champlain. Okay, so picture this. The scene is almost perfectly calm. You've got our two main witnesses, 16-year-old Michael and 19-year-old Janet. They were the only two people on the boat dock. See, most of the other campers and staff were off at a swim meet, so the camp was pretty much deserted. It was just them, the sunset, and the lake. The whole thing started pretty simply. First, a bright light shows up, which, they first thought was maybe just the planet Venus. But then it dropped down fast and released 3 smaller, glowing objects. And then, one of those disc-shaped crafts heads directly for them, until a beam of light shines right down and hits them both. And then, just nothing. Their very next conscious memory is waking up on that exact same dock, feeling totally dazed and confused, hearing the sounds of the other campers coming back. An unknown amount of time, we're talking possibly hours, had just completely vanished. All right, let's jump forward in time again, back to 1978, with Section 3, Memories Under Hypnosis. See, after Michael's nightmares started, the investigator, Walter Webb, he realized the only way they could possibly get to those missing hours from a decade ago was through hypnotic regression. Now, Webb, he was a respected astronomer and researcher. He actually managed to track down Janet and set it up so both she and Michael would undergo hypnosis. And this part is absolutely critical. He made sure their sessions were totally separate. This was a scientific control, right, to make sure one person's story couldn't accidentally influence the others. And the results? They were just astonishing. I mean, independently, with zero contact between them, they both described being lifted by a beam of light into a craft. They both saw small beings with large heads, were placed on a medical table for some kind of examination, and they even remembered seeing the other person in the room with them. The consistency in their stories is just remarkable. So what exactly did they say happened to them? Let's get into Section 4 and look at the very specific and frankly very bizarre details that came out of those hypnotic sessions. The level of detail they both remembered is pretty incredible. Independently, they described these beings as having huge heads, long necks, massive wraparound eyes, no ears that you could see, and 3 pointy kind of web-like fingers. They even agreed that the skin felt damp and clammy to the touch. The experience they remembered was just cold, clinical. They described being on these examination tables while these procedures were happening, like skin scrapings and fluid samples being taken. Janet, in particular, recalled this feeling of extreme colds and a weird pinching sensation on her neck. But right in the middle of this terrifying physical exam, both Michael and Janet remembered receiving the exact same message telepathically, a reassurance that completely contradicted what was physically happening to them. We are not here to hurt you. It's just such an odd, unsettling detail. Okay, let's take a step back and try to analyze this like the investigator Walter Webb did. This is Section 5, the investigator's final report. This is where we have to weigh this incredibly compelling testimony against the one thing this case desperately needs: physical proof. This slide really lays out the whole dilemma perfectly, doesn't it? In the evidence column, you've got two unbelievably consistent witness accounts. You have some other camp staff who saw strange lights, and you have a rigorous 5-year investigation. But then you look at the skepticism column, we know hypnotic memory can be suggestible. There's that 10-year delay, and of course, the complete lack of any physical evidence. And this, right here, this is the biggest hurdle for the entire case. After all the interviews, the hypnosis, the 5 years of research, this is the total number of physical artifacts, marks, or traces that were ever recovered. 0. Nothing. The entire case comes down to their testimony. And because of that, the Buff Ledge case has this really unique legacy. It's not as famous as some of the other big abduction stories, but inside UFO literature, it's really respected. It's seen as a well-documented, thoroughly investigated case that just remains completely, and maybe forever, unproven. And so we're left with this question. Were these remarkably similar stories just the product of some kind of shared delusion? Or were they the genuine, terrifying memories of a forgotten encounter, finally breaking through to the surface after a whole decade of silence?